Hello, friends, and welcome back to Apexeraz, where thought meets transformation.
Great to be back.
Today, we're continuing our deep dive into Schopenhauer's The Wisdom of Life. We're tackling Chapter 3.
Yes, property, wealth, happiness, or the lack thereof. A classic Schopenhauer topic.
Exactly. We want to unpack his thoughts on, material possessions and how they actually connect or maybe don't connect to real well-being.
This is the question that never really gets old, does it?
Not at all. And if you're here to get a solid grasp of these ideas without wading through dense texts for weeks, well, you're in the right place. We're aiming for that quick but thorough understanding.
And Schopenhauer gives us a good starting point. He actually leans on Epicurus, specifically his division of human needs.
Right. Epicurus' famous three categories. Let's lay those out. First up, the natural and necessary needs.
Yeah, the basics: food, shelter, clothing. Victus et amictus, as they put it.
Things you genuinely need to survive. And Schopenhauer notes these are generally, well, satisfiable.
Usually, yes. Within reason, they have limits. Then you get
Right.
the second type.
Which are?
Natural, but not strictly necessary. Think gratification of certain senses. It's a bit beyond basic survival.
Okay, so maybe enjoying good food rather than just eating not to starve, that kind of thing.
Precisely. And Schopenhauer, maybe more than Epicurus himself, zeroes in on these. They're a bit harder to satisfy, a bit more open-ended.
Right, a little more slippery. And then the third category, this is where it gets really messy, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Needs that are neither natural nor necessary. This is your luxury, your extravagance, keeping up appearances, all that stuff.
Endless desires. Schopenhauer sees these as basically a trap.
Yeah.
They can never truly be filled.
And that framework is really fundamental to his whole argument about wealth, because right away he says there's no, magic number, no specific amount of money guarantees happiness.
It's not about the absolute sum in your bank account. That's such a key takeaway.
Totally. It's about the ratio.
The ratio. Explain that.
Well, he puts it like a fraction. Your happiness isn't just the numerator, what you have. It's deeply connected to the denominator, what you claim or desire. Okay. So if your desires, the denominator, grow just as fast or faster than your wealth, the numerator.
Then the value of the fraction, your contentment, doesn't actually increase. You could be incredibly rich, but still feel poor if your wants are astronomical.
That makes so much sense. And he talks about this personal horizon, right? What we consider even possible for ourselves.
Exactly. We're only really bothered by not having things that we feel we could or should have, things within our own perceived horizon.
So the billionaire's yacht doesn't necessarily torment the person struggling to pay rent because it's just completely off their map.
In many cases, yes, it's too far removed from their expectations. Conversely, a very wealthy person can be devastated if a specific hope, something within their horizon, fails, even if they still have millions.
The wealth doesn't cushion that specific blow.
Not always, no. Which leads him to that famous, rather grim analogy about riches being like seawater.
Yes, the more you drink.
The thirstier you become. It applies to fame, too, he says. It suggests desire just escalates with possession. It's a feedback loop of wanting more.
Mm-hmm. But what's also interesting is how we adapt. If you lose wealth, it's obviously painful initially.
Of course.
But after a while, Schopenhauer suggests we tend to lower our claims, our expectations to fit the new reality. And contentment can sort of restabilize.
We adjust downwards.
Yeah.
And the opposite happens when we gain wealth.
Yes, our claims inflate, sometimes really quickly. And he argues that the initial burst of joy from getting richer isn't about the wealth itself long term.
What is it about then?
It's about the process of those claims expanding, the feeling of increased possibility, but it's temporary.
Once you get used to the new level,
Indifference sets in. It becomes the new normal. That thrill is gone.
he quotes the Odyssey, doesn't he? Something about our thoughts being fleeting, like the day granted by the gods.
Yeah, emphasizing how transient that satisfaction is. Real discontent, he thinks, comes from that constant striving, always pushing your claims higher, especially if you don't have the means to match them.
Okay, so if wealth doesn't guarantee happiness and desire is insatiable, why is money held in such high regard? It seems almost irrational.
Well, from a practical standpoint, he argues it's because money is seen as this kind of universal satisfier. We have countless needs and wants, right?
Food, shelter, entertainment, security. The list goes on.
Exactly. And while a specific thing like bread only satisfies hunger, money seems to promise the potential to satisfy any of those needs, at least in the abstract.
So it's like a placeholder for potential satisfaction. He calls specific goods diathepros, tie good for something.
Right. But money, he calls it absolutely good, because it can be converted into almost anything we might desire. It's potential power over circumstance.
That makes sense why it's so prized. Now, he gets quite practical, too, offering advice about managing wealth, especially inherited wealth.
He does. His advice for someone born rich is basically treat this fortune as a buffer, a shield against potential suffering and misfortune.
Not as a license to just spend wildly.
Definitely not. He contrasts this with people who earn their fortune, say, through a specific talent or profession.
What's the danger there?
They sometimes mistake their talent for permanent capital and their earnings as just the interest. They might spend everything they make, assuming the talent will always generate income.
But skills can fade, markets can change.
Precisely. So if the income stream dries up, they might have nothing left. He thinks those who inherit are often more conscious of needing to preserve the capital itself.
That's an interesting distinction. He says artists and professionals need to be careful about building capital, maybe more so than, say, laborers.
Yeah, because a laborer might lose a job but often still has their fundamental capacity to work. An artist or specialist whose unique skill becomes obsolete is in a much tougher spot. They need savings.
And merchants, he notes, kind of get this inherently. They see money purely as a tool to make more money.
They understand capital preservation and growth almost intuitively. It's the nature of their business.
Okay, this leads into some really fascinating psychological observations he makes about poverty and wealth. He suggests that someone who grew up poor and then gets rich might actually be more extravagant. That seems counterintuitive.
It does at first glance. But think about the mindset. Someone born into wealth often sees it as, well, normal, essential, something to be carefully guarded, like breathing air. It fosters prudence.
Okay.
But someone who dragged themselves out of poverty might view wealth as this incredible, unexpected surplus, a bonus beyond mere survival.
So they might feel freer to enjoy it, maybe even waste it, that they know deep down they can survive without it.
That seems to be the idea. They've known life on the ground floor, so to speak. He uses that very vivid quote from Shakespeare.
The one from Henry VI.
Yeah. Beggars mounted run their horse to death. It implies a kind of reckless abandon once fortune arrives.
And he also mentions they might have this firm and excessive trust in fate, or maybe in their own ability to always bounce back.
Right, like, I made it once, I can do it again if needed, which might paradoxically lead to less careful management of the current fortune.
He applies this to women too, doesn't he? Saying a woman poor before marriage might spend more freely than one with a rich dowry.
Yes, because the one with the dowry might have been raised with that mindset of preserving the family wealth, seeing it as essential. He even cites Dr. Johnson agreeing on this.
So his rather blunt advice is, don't leave your capital entirely in the hands of a wife who came from poverty.
A bit harsh by modern standards, perhaps, but that's his observation based on this psychological model. It's about perceived necessity versus perceived surplus.
All this really underlines how much value he places on financial independence, doesn't it? Having enough to live on without working.
Immense value. He calls it being truly sui juris master of your own time and person. Freedom from the chronic disease of penury, he calls it.
Freedom from forced labor, essentially.
Exactly. That, for him, is one of the greatest possible advantages in life. He even says the difference between having, say, a modest competence and having vast riches is much smaller than the difference between having that modest competence and having nothing at all.
That step up from nothing to something is the crucial one for true independence.
Absolutely. And this freedom finds its highest purpose, in his view, when it lands in the lap of someone with great intellectual gifts.
Why specifically them?
Because inherited wealth allows such a person to dedicate their life to pursuits that benefit humanity, science, art, philosophy, things that often don't pay well or at all. They can work for mankind, not for money.
It liberates genius from the marketplace.
That's the ideal, yes.
Yeah.
He contrasts this sharply with the person born rich who lacks intellect or purpose.
The idler and thief of time.
Right. They have this incredible gift of freedom, but just waste it, maybe become extravagant, suffer from boredom.
Yeah.
They miss the chance to contribute anything meaningful, a tragic waste in his eyes.
Now, things take a slightly unexpected, maybe even cynical turn when he talks about wealth and politics.
Yes. This is where he suggests being penniless can actually be an advantage for political climbers.
Okay, that definitely requires some unpacking. Why would being broke help you in politics, according to Schopenhauer?
His reasoning is quite cutting. He basically says that politics often involves, well, A lot of bowing and scraping and trying to make others feel superior to you, at least initially.
Ouch.
And someone who is genuinely a pauper, someone acutely aware of their own low standing in material terms, is perhaps more ready and willing to perform that kind of subservience.
To flatter, to applaud mediocrity, to, as he puts it, know how to beg.
Pretty much. They have less pride or independence to get in the way of doing what's necessary to climb that particular ladder. He quotes Goethe, something like, "Don't complain about low aims, they rule the world."
It's a pretty bleak view of political ambition.
It is. He contrasts this with someone born with independent means. They're more likely to have, well, an independent spirit.
Less likely to put up with nonsense or grovel.
Exactly. They might resist the necessary kowtowing. He brings up Voltaire's line about not wanting to waste life cringing before contemptible people.
So independence of means fosters independence of mind, which can be a liability in certain political environments.
That seems to be his rather provocative argument. He does add a little nuance, though.
Oh.
He acknowledges Juvenal's point about poverty hindering talent ingenium, but suggests that's maybe more true for arts and literature than for the purely political game.
Interesting distinction. Talent might struggle against poverty in art, but lack of means might not hold you back or could even help in political maneuvering.
A cynical take, but that's his view.
And just quickly, before we wrap up, he touches on family and friends.
Yeah, just briefly. He makes the point that a wife and children aren't really possessions in the same way. If anything, he suggests they possess the man.
Huh. And friends.
Friends belong to each other equally, a mutual relationship, not ownership. So they fall outside this discussion of what one has.
Got it. So pulling all these threads together, Schopenhauer's view is complex. Wealth is subjective, desire often boundless, and happiness isn't simply bought.
Not at all. More wealth can even its own kind of suffering, like boredom or the anxiety of maintaining it. It's really about managing expectations and finding purpose beyond accumulation.
Which brings us right back to that core question. What's the real link between our stuff and our well-being? Thinking about Schopenhauer makes you really examine your own horizon, your own desires.
Definitely. Where do your claims lie? Are they serving your happiness or undermining it?
It's a powerful lens. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. How much does Schopenhauer's 19th century analysis ring true today? What are the modern forms of that luxury and prodigality he warned about? The things we chase that might leave us empty?
A lot to chew on there. It's certainly still relevant.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Remember to follow Apexres on YouTube, Spotify, X, Instagram, and Threads. Join us next time as we continue rethinking what it means to live a life of depth, not just display. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.